light and shadow. A very, very important set of things when you are trying to create art that is realistic. It can make things look spooky and weird. It can soften and change the mood of an artwork. It can help you see form or three-dimensionality. In fact, it's the best way to do it. But in order to understand how to successfully create light and shadow in your artwork and create the mood and the three-dimensionality that you're looking for, that will also depend on you knowing and understanding the science behind it. So, if you're ready to take a journey with me, I'm going to turn the lights back on and we can have a discussion about how light works. That's much better. Now I can see you and you can see me, and it's not quite so spooky and scary. I have a few things here to help me illustrate the point. I have some of these geometric forms to help us identify the parts of a shadow, okay, and how light works. It is important to know that light travels in straight lines. It can be reflected, but for the most part, light is going to travel in one direction and it's going to hit one side of the surface. To demonstrate, I have my cell phone and I'm going to shine it on this sphere. And I want you to pay attention to how the shadow changes depending on where my light source is. Sometimes it's most of it. If it's kind of in front, if it's at the top, you're going to see. If it's behind, you might see just very little. Okay? So, light source is very important in understanding where is the light coming from and where is the light going to shine and where is my shadow going to be. What you'll want to know is that your shadow will almost always be on the opposite side of your light source. So, that is also what is also important is to know the shape. This, because it is a rounded sphere, is going to have a smooth transition from light to shadow. If I were to take a shape or form, like a cube, it's going to look a little bit different. Here again, I'm only able to see maybe 3 parts of this form at one time. And depending on how I hold it or how I hold my light, it's going to affect it differently. These are much more the tones of value that you've done in value scales. They're not going to slowly gradate or gradient like the sphere. You're going to have flat shapes of value and shadow, usually with one side being closer to the light source, being the lightest. In this case, it's the top. Then you have the darkest one, which is the furthest away. That actually is the one facing you. And then a medium tone of value, which over here is on the right. It's getting a little bit of light, but not as much as the top. So they are seen as flat tones of value, a light, a medium, and a dark. So let's see how this works in practice. For this exercise, you'll want your sketchbook. You'll want a regular pencil. The mechanical pencils don't give us really enough lead space to be able to get some nice smooth areas of gradation and shading, so I definitely recommend using a regular wooden pencil. I have also drawn a diagram here where I have a little light bulb. This way you can see where my light is coming from, and that's going to help me decide how to shade in this sphere. So if I can draw some guidelines, I'm just going to sketch in for practice some guidelines to know the light is going to be shining on this part of my sphere, which means that my shadow is going to be darkest over on this side. Now, because a sphere is rounded, I can use a gradient or a gradation. I know that the light is going to be strongest where it is closest to the light source, so I know that I'm going to have a highlight around here, so I lightly marked that in. Now, this solid sphere is going to need a shadow. For that, just for my comfort, I'm actually going to turn this upside down because I like to go with the shape. I don't want a straight line across here. It is round. So I'm going to shade with the shape. And I can push down. Remember from your value scale practice that as you add more pressure, you get darker. And then you can slowly lighten your pressure, again, with the form and with the lines of the form. I can lighten up to slowly get up to where that highlight might be. And then I can take my finger or a blending stump and I can even further smooth out that gradient. I can erase from my edges. This is part of the reason why we start in pencil. And if I feel like I need to darken in any areas, I can go in and I can darken them up a little bit on this side. Okay, we're not going to worry so much about cast shadows. If you're really feeling like getting into that, you can observe it a little bit. It's going to be on the opposite because the shadow is going to cast this way. But I'm not going to worry too much about cast shadows there. That is how you shade a sphere. When working with flat-sided shapes, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to have a little bit of a different rule set. Again, I encourage you to use some guidelines. My light source, my little light bulb is here. You could draw a little sun or just a dot sometimes. And I can draw in some guidelines to know where exactly most of my light is hitting. This side is getting lots of light from this light source. So this whole side can be left, just like in a value scale, can be left white, or if I want it to be kind of like my gray figures, I can very lightly use the side of my pencil to add a light value there. My next darkest side, which is turned a little bit away, but still getting some light, would be this top one. So I know from that example that this is going to be a medium shadow. So I can, again, just like in a value scale, I can press down and make this a little bit darker. Since I'm working in graphite, if I accidentally go too dark, that's okay. There's that. Now, this does look like a three-dimensional square or cube. But since my light source is here, this side should be my darkest. I'm imagining this is slightly behind, up and behind this. So this is going to be receiving the least amount of light and is going to need to be a dark, full value. Now I have sped this up so that you don't have to watch me do the whole thing, but know that I am pressing hard and trying to get as soft and even a dark value as I can. Now that you've seen me do a flat-sided shape like a cube, a pyramid, and parts of a cone would be kind of like this, and a sphere like this, which a cone would have part rounded, part flat side shape. Now it's time for you to go back to your shapes that you drew with me earlier and choose a light source for each of the shapes that you did and practice on your own with just your pencil. Shade in these figures, practicing adding in from a light source using guidelines just like I have shown you. Have fun.